Borax production in the United States began commercially in California at Clear Lake, north of San Francisco, around 1864 and continued until 1868. The industry thrived until the early 1870s, when larger and purer quantities of borax were discovered in several alkaline marshes in eastern California and western Nevada, notably around Columbus and Teals Marsh. Significant deposits were found in the Saline Valley Flats northwest of Death Valley as early as 1874, leading to numerous borax claims up through the 1890s. However, these discoveries saw limited development due to the lack of railroad facilities, harsh climatic conditions, and insufficient richness to make exploitation economically viable. In 1874, miner production began at Searles Lake in San Bernardino County, California, west of the Slate Range. The construction and operation of a refinery there transformed the valley into one of the most extensively worked and productive borax areas in the region. Later, other deposits were found on the salt pan north of Furnace Creek's mouth and in marshes southeast of Death Valley, close to Resting Spring. In 1881, Aaron and Rose Winters discovered borax north of the mouth of Furnace Creek. William T. Coleman and Company quickly purchased their holdings for $20,000. Coleman then established the Greenland Salt and Borax Mining Company, later renamed the Harmony Borax Mining Company. In 1882, this corporation took over management of the Harmony Borax Works. It was a tiny community with buildings made of stone and adobe as well as a refinery. The nearby homestead, later known as the Furnace Creek Ranch, was set up as a supply point for his workers and livestock. The Amargosa Borax Works near Resting Spring and another of Coleman's enterprises operated during the summer months when extreme heat hindered refining in the valley. In 1881, Isidore Daunet, a Frenchman, started the small-scale Eagle Borax Works further down the valley near Bennett's Well. But Daunet committed himself in 1884 as a result of the operation's incompetence and personal disappointments. It's remarkable that any of these operations succeeded at all, given their remote locations, harsh desert conditions, and distance from major transportation systems. The type of borat being exploited on the salt flats of Death Valley was eulexite, which appeared as cotton balls scraped off the salt pan and refined by evaporation and crystallization. Initially, this was thought to be the only commercially viable form of naturally occurring borax. However, ongoing exploration by Coleman Company prospectors and others soon revealed that the playa borates were secondary deposits formed from the leaching of borat lime beds. The main deposit was discovered in beds and veins like those used in quartz mining operations. It was a richer type of borate that was subsequently called in William T. Coleman's honor. 3 miners named Philander Lee, Harry Spiller, and Billy Yount found a sizable mountain of this kind of ore in the Black Mountains foothills in 1883, south of Furnace Creek Wash. They apparently gained $4,000 selling Monte Blanco to Coleman, and then they departed, having made their fortune in the borax business. Within a year, an even larger deposit was discovered east of the Greenwater Range, about 7 miles southwest of Death Valley Junction. This looked to be the southernmost lode in a rich Colemanite belt that extended down Furnace Creek Wash from northwest to southeast to the Furnace Creek Ranch region. Coleman purchased this property as well, naming it the Lila C. These discoveries, which were poised to transform the borax industry in the United States, seemed destined to remain untapped for several reasons. First, the larger, more concentrated deposits required underground mining methods. Second, they needed more advanced refining techniques because they were not easily soluble in hot water. Third, there were no transportation lines extending into this undeveloped area. Fourth, there was no nearby supply center. Fifth, the extreme summer heat in the Badlands made mining impractical during that season. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, Coleman's desert refineries were performing so well that he had little reason to shift operations immediately. These enormous and outstanding resources may have gone unexplored if more Colemanite veins hadn't been discovered in 1883 in the Calico Mountains, which are located in San Bernardino County, some 12 miles northeast of the railroad at Daggett. The fact that these resources were close to the railroad presented a serious risk to Coleman's activities in Death Valley. To address this, Coleman quickly acquired the most valuable claims and focused on the future, starting research at his Alameda, California refinery to find a profitable method for refining the material. Meanwhile, production continued at his Harmony and Amargosa businesses. When Coleman's financial empire collapsed in 1890, Francis Marion Borax Smith acquired his holdings in Barate, Death Valley, and Amargosa Valley, along with his Alameda refinery. Smith consolidated these assets and others into the Pacific Coast Borax Company, also taking over the Colemanite deposits in the Furnace Creek Wash area. However, falling borax prices due to imports from Italy and an oversupply in the market led Smith to shut down his Death Valley operations and focus on Barate, where more cost-effective processes could refine richer ore. From 1890 to 1907, Barate became the leading producer of borax and boracic acid in the U.S. Eventually, the depth of the underground workings made further development too costly, prompting Smith to refocus on his Death Valley reserves. The Lila C mine's growth was hindered by its isolated position. The Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad was partially sponsored by the profits from the Calico Corporation, despite its intended route being the Santa Fe line from Ludlow to Death Valley Junction and then on to Goldfield, Nevada. Work at the mine began even before the railroad was completed, with the initial ore transported to market using 20 mule teams. The T&T Railroad reached Death Valley Junction by 1907, having started operations in May 1905. Soon after, a 7-mile spur was built that led to the Lila C Camp and Ryan Station. All equipment was moved to the new location, where a calcining factory was also erected, and the Barate activities were shut down. The Pacific Coast Borax Company hadn't overlooked its holdings west of Death Valley. By 1909, a newspaper report suggested that due to the low price of borax, the Lila C mine might be abandoned in favor of the more economically viable Mount Blanco deposits, which were plentiful. The building of a narrow-gauge railroad from Ryan to the new deposits made this transition possible. As the ore at the Lila C started to run out around 1914, plans were made to relocate operations to deposits on Death Valley's western edge. The business's engineers estimated that these substantial deposits would last the company for many years, and that the Monte Blanco and Corkscrew claims would provide much more resources. The Death Valley narrow-gauge train was constructed because access to these resources required a new train. It connected Death Valley Junction to the recently established mines. In January 1915, the Lila C mine was closed, though not entirely abandoned, and borax operations moved to a new settlement at the western edge of the Greenwater Range overlooking Death Valley. This town, initially named DeVere, was quickly renamed New Ryan. The lower-grade ores from the Played-Out and Biddy-McCarty mines were processed at Death Valley Junction using a brand-new calcining plant. The original Death Valley Railroad study said that Ryan was intended to be a stopgap for a line that would eventually continue down Furnace Creek Wash to the Monte Blanco and Corkscrew Canyon deposits if necessary. However, the planned extension never happened because the Ryan mines, Played-Out, Upper and Lower Biddy, Grandview, Lizzie V. Oakley, and Widow, became even more productive as development progressed, continuing until 1928. In the year, Razorite deposits that were conveniently accessible were found close to Kramer, California, later renamed Boron. This new deposit was more economical to mine due to its proximity to a processing plant, leading to a shift in mining operations. When the Death Valley Junction concentrating plant closed in 1928, a significant chapter in borax production and processing in the Death Valley region came to an end. From then until 1956, borat mining almost ceased, with mines on standby and producing only small amounts for special orders. This lull lasted until 1971, when Tenneco, Inc. began open-pit mining at the Boraxo mine near Ryan. The Furnace Creek Visitor Center and Museum in Death Valley National Park offers detailed information about the region's borax mining history, with park rangers available to answer questions. Furthermore, the oldest building in Death Valley, Furnace Creek Ranch, is home to the privately held Borax Museum. Originally, this building served as an office, bunkhouse, and ore checking station for borax miners. It was first situated in 20 Mule Team Canyon before being relocated to Furnace Creek. A collection of minerals in the background of Death Valley's borax mining are on display at the museum. Behind the museum, visitors can see an assortment of mining and transportation equipment.